Hello, and welcome to the premiere episode of the BDN Content Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Dean Nibley, founder of BDN Content LLC. On this podcast, I'll be talking about all things related to entrepreneurship, content marketing, Bitcoin, and business and economic news. On this episode, I'm just going to cover some general topics and give a quick introduction. So, an introduction to me, who am I? I've been a freelance writer specializing in crypto, Bitcoin, and blockchain for 5 years now. I've been involved with Bitcoin since 2013. I've self-published a couple books. One of them reached the #1 new release spot on Amazon. And it's been a while now that I've been just turning my passion and skills in writing into a successful business. It took a long time, but now I'm at a point where I'm completely independent and I make a living just writing things for people. I've done white papers, investment newsletters, email marketing, a lot of SEO content, and the list goes on. I've been published in publications like MSN Money, SoFi, Blockworks, The Balance, Business Insider, Nicoya Research, and many more. So that's enough about me. Let's just get into a topic of how to make money with your passion if you're self-employed. Now, the easiest way, in my opinion, is to find what you really like to do and you're good at and figure out a way to turn that into some kind of enterprise. Now, some people disagree with that. They say that making money is totally separate from your passion, and it can be if that's what you want. You can just look at it that way, but in my opinion, you're not as likely to be successful because you're going to get burnt out and it may not be sustainable long term. Whereas if you just can figure out what God-given gifts you have and how to get someone to pay you for putting that into practice, then that could be a lot easier and more sustainable route. For example, myself, I always knew I had a gift for writing and research and was interested in certain topics. And it took a while, but eventually I was fortunate enough to fall into freelance writing and over time turned that into a successful business. And again, it doesn't just happen overnight, although once you have some success, people tend to assume that's how it happened. For example, here's a funny little story. One time I was at a meetup event at a brewery and people were all asking what do you do to each other, and eventually a conversation came to me. I gave a quick little explanation, and after hearing that I can basically make my own hours and work from anywhere, this woman sitting across from me, her name was Karen, believe it or not even joking, her actual name was Karen, and she just said, "Sounds like you got it made." And I just was like, yeah, that's all I said, but I had a lot of thoughts, but I kept them to myself because obviously it took a while to get to where I'm at, and it wasn't easy. There was a lot of staying up late and working hard and research and study, and sometimes working 7 days a week when I started, and working for really measly rates. I mean, I was working for content mills that pay like 2 cents a word, which probably amounts to less than minimum wage. But it was all building up to something better, and that's an important point to keep in mind when you're first trying to start out and market yourself. Is it feels like nothing's happening for a while, but as long as you're building a foundation, then it can lead to something in time. Like when you're putting out content on LinkedIn, Twitter, other social media, you might not get any traction. You might get close to zero engagement for a long time, but if you're doing it right and you're consistent with it, then eventually it will lead you to somewhere. So next point is, once you have a little success, how do you protect and grow your money? And just this disclaimer here, I'm not a financial advisor. Nothing I say can be taken as financial advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own research, consult with your own financial advisor and tax professional, and come to your own decisions. You have to determine what your own risk tolerance is, what your goals are, what time horizon you're on, before you can really figure out what you want to do for yourself. But one point I'd like to make is that trading short term is a losing proposition for 99% of people. Almost no one beats the market over the long term. Even people who are highly skilled and intelligent and research whatever they invest in as much as possible. Like Kathy Wood, for example, may have a great year or two, and then they wind up just getting annihilated. And so, in my opinion, the best thing for most people to do, and the average day trader does even worse than that, right? And so the best thing to do is really, in my opinion, just average into something like an index fund that mimics the overall market performance. There's a number of different index funds for different sectors of the market and different indexes for different markets. And you've got the S&P index fund, you've got the NASDAQ 100 QQQ index fund. SPYD is focused on dividend stocks, pays a really good dividend. Two things you want to keep in mind when you're looking at an index fund are the dividend payout and the expense ratio. Typically, an expense ratio of like 10 to 20 basis points is ideal, whereas if you get up to 1% or 2% or more, then over the long term, that winds up really eating into any profits you might have made. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And also, of course, averaging into Bitcoin over time is a great way to protect yourself from inflation and fiat currencies. I know people like to argue otherwise these days because Bitcoin has gone down along with every other asset in the world. Literally every single other asset in the entire world in 2022 has been tanking. There's been no safe haven, whether it's gold, bonds, stocks, real estate, commodities, everything, crypto, every single thing has been going down. But that also creates a potential generational buying opportunity because it's likely that prices for many things are going to hit a rock bottom, and it'll be an opportunity that we may not see, most of us may not see again for the rest of our lifetimes. So yeah, average into Bitcoin over time and have at least a 4-year time horizon. I would say even longer than that if you can. And average into Bitcoin and index funds and just have the plan of never selling unless you absolutely need that liquidity. Unless you have no choice and have to get your hands on some cash right away, just don't sell these things because they compound over time, and that's the most effective, easiest, simplest way to grow wealth. But another thing about all that is that I've come to the conclusion that some people really just shouldn't invest in anything. They should just hold cash forever and be content with staying poor, or at least poorer than they might have been otherwise, because they can't handle the emotions that come from seeing their money fluctuate, or they just anticipating what could happen is too stressful for them. Here's an example. I have a friend who is a Air Force veteran, retired. He has a traumatic brain injury, and so he can't really manage too many things on his own. He has trouble just logging in to online accounts. He says he can log into his checking account, but that's pretty much it. And so after talking about it for a while, I went down to the bank with him, and we spoke with an advisor there at Bank of America, and probably half an hour at least, and talked about the different options they had for portfolio management and such. And I told him to go with this option that's charged a small fee, but would give him a balanced portfolio, and he would have an advisor there to talk to whenever he needed. And long story short, he didn't do it. He wound up just not going through with it for whatever reason. And so that's it basically. I think that not a lot of people, but a sizable minority of people are probably in that category where the best option might just be not to do anything really. So that's really all I have to say for this first episode. In the future, I'll go more in depth into entrepreneurship and investing and content marketing and Bitcoin and crypto. In fact, I have some things planned some really good things in store. So I encourage you to tune in to future episodes, and thanks for listening to the BDN Content Podcast. See you next time.